Sven calling in from Washington wants to talk to us. Sven, what's going on?
Good evening. How are you?
Doing great. Just having a good time on the show. How can we help you?
Nice. So, I guess I'm an eclectic pagan. I fall mainly between Platonism and Epicureanism.
Okay.
And just morality is the one thing that grounds me in a soul belief. Because I like to listen to Joe Rogan because I'm pretty progressive, but I think that's where all my libertarian and right-wing-ish conservative friends get their news and info.
Okay.
Like Brett Weinstein, an evolutionary biologist. Him and Jordan Peterson would go back and back on how what Hitler did isn't truly wrong because you can't say what is wrong or right in moral relativism. And I just don't. While I can get certain things can be gray areas, I don't see how we as, and maybe it's our Western bias, but we can't say that raping a baby is wrong morally.
Before we go into this topic, Can we go back for just a second? Did you say you believe in souls because of your beliefs in morality? Did I hear that right?
Correct. I don't think other animals have the same morality that we have, or able to have the concept of morality that we have.
I guess I'm kind of curious. What do you mean by souls? What's kind of your definition of that?
A soul is the human spirit, what makes us, not react just by our brain. There's a deeper understanding that we're looking for than just the natural world.
Okay, yeah, so kind of human inquisitiveness, right? A drive for explanations beyond whatever, right? But beyond just eating and hunting and having sex, right?
Right, because there's no animal, as far as an animal perspective, just being that I should empathize with Hitler and see that he was protecting the Germans who were being ostracized, and good for him. But how that can lead to genocide is just, when you have a strong understanding of morality as a whole, you can see that genocide would not be the way to go to protect your people.
I see you on there. I guess
correct.
Yeah, maybe this, obviously you want to talk more about morality. I'm kind of interested in this soul idea. If we could just talk about it for just a second. And then I'd love to talk to you about the morality thing, because that's really interesting, because I think this is pretty common. I think this is something that people bring up about humans and what makes us different from other animals, right? That we have this kind of spirit, that we have this kind of soul. And I think if I'm speaking for Oz here, as well as myself, I don't think we would share that same belief in that sense. And so with that different assumption about people, I think we're also going to have different takes on morality, if that makes sense, right? Because I don't know Oz's take, but I see morality as a humanly defined construct. I'm not sure if there is an intrinsic goodness or an intrinsic badness beyond what people have defined. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be moral facts, but that's with the context of a particular system. And of course, there's multiple systems, of course, that we could talk. I mean, pragmatism, utilitarianism. I mean, people have been talking about this, since there's been people, probably. And I don't know if there's an objective right or wrong in the sense of a correct action in every single scenario, but there might be one that's better for most systems can accept, and might be more wrong for most systems. And maybe we can look at that, but it's hard for me to come to the conclusion in particular that there is one single unitary system of morality, or that humans could ever discover that. And I certainly don't know if it would cause me to believe in the idea of a soul, only because I can see how we as people understanding the world, it's not that other animals don't have acceptable actions within their groups. I think if you look from an anthropological perspective at different ape groups, they have in and out groups, they have what they would consider right and wrong within their own systems of hierarchies. It might be different from how we understand morality, but so is every culture on Earth, right? I mean, we all have different understandings of morality. And so I think you can look at a gorilla tribe or a chimpanzee tribe and see they have acceptable and unacceptable actions within their group, and there are consequences to those actions and how they interact with each other. And to me, like, isn't that morality? Isn't that ethics? Sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there, but am I making sense to you, Sven?
You are. The only thing I would say that separates us is like they have a distinct animal natural reaction, whereas humans can like just.
But don't we as humans too? I mean, have you ever thought how they want to hit somebody?
Well,
you know,
have what?
I mean, have you ever had the urge to just want to hit somebody when you're having an argument with them? You know, like there's nothing logical to that. That's just, I think that's something primal in us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, we are animals. That's where I think like our souls is separate from our animal natural being, and that's why we're always on the search for the right morality and things like humans couldn't understand it. You know, we'll never understand what gravity is, but we know what it does and how it reacts, so that we can use it and manipulate it in our real life. But the goal is still to search for like the physical rules, not just say, oh well, it's there, we don't know why, who cares, move on. Even though that's what a lot of modern physicists do.
Sven, what? First of all, so I'm clear again. How do you define the soul again? Can you tell me that again?
Oh, just as like you could say like a third party in our system between our brains and our body. It's hard to go into without.
Okay,
and backstory. But yeah, I think it's an essence within humans only.
Okay, and how do you and I and Dan, how do we find that soul? How do we know that that's there? Because I'm not aware of having a soul.
Well, because like I said, with like the court system, you know, instead of just reactionary, we're going to ban them or discharge them from society. We can have nuance and have talk and discuss why they did it and the pros and cons and how we should rehabilitate them in society or just excommunicate them from the clan. You know, we have a lot more nuance than animals who have the direct response.
Okay, so how do we get the three of us talking right now? How do we know that that's a soul?
Well, we don't. But like I said, it's like, how do we know it's gravity that's holding us down? We don't. We believe that it's this essence that when a large mass gets together, it's going to start hold things down, and we can measure that is an active thing happening, but we can't say what it is, like on a quantum level, you know.
Well, we may not be able to say what it is at a quantum level.
I prove what gravity is, and
sure, yeah, and I understand that's a whole discussion about the gravity thing, but we can at least make observations and say, oh, that thing happening to that other object, that's gravity, right? Because like that's what we've been calling it. That's that effect that we see on the world, right? I think what Oz might be getting at, and like maybe what we're understanding is, you know, we might be able to call what you're saying as like a higher order intelligence, you know, maybe a system of problem solving that people have. And we might say, well, how do we know that that's a soul in particular? Because if we're talking about that problem solving, again, yeah, we're the most advanced at it, definitely, because we can talk to it. But again, I do see other animals, just as an example, right? Figuring out problem solving within their own groups. Now, they don't have the speech and advanced kinds of communication and policies and forms of government that we do to handle all their issues. But I also don't know if a soul is necessarily required for that or just a big brain. You get what I'm saying?
I do. You know, yeah. Psychology comes into a big, you know, is it psychology or is it a soul? Is a huge debate. But like I said, it is something that I don't know. Most people see, you know, I'm not a theist, but it's like when Christians look around and say, you know, you can see design. Well, it's not a good thing, and we should look for more details of why and what. It's kind of like the soul is kind of just a known thing for most people, and that's why so many people turn religious or spiritual and not religious, because the spirit is the one thing that as a human we know that something is different about us.
I agree with you. I think that's an intuitive observation, definitely, right? That like we're super different and we have like, you know, something about us is different from other animals. I guess it's just hard for me to go the soul route, you know, because I like even and this isn't a criticism of you, Sven, because if I ask this of other people and I ask like, what do you mean by soul? And like, we have a hard time defining what that is. And I'm not sure that we can really know something as like, say we know something super well without being able to define it exactly. Right. So I don't know, like, what do you think when we say that maybe there might not be a soul? Like maybe this is something that humans have come up with. Would you say that's impossible? Would you say that might be an explanation? What do you think about that?
Personally, I have a very, very hard time ever believing that there is not a soul in humans. Primarily, and that's why I said morality, because I cannot justify certain immoral acts. And whereas a lot of intelligent physicists and biologists these days are starting to say, like, when we have to justify it because it's not really a moral question, it's just an action that people take. Whereas, you can't convince me that it's okay to rape a baby just because some other tribe thinks it's okay to rape babies.
Yeah, I
think it's my soul that prevents me from believing that genocide is okay,
But but here's the thing though, right, Sven? Like, there are people out there who have justified everything you just said. So are we saying that those people don't have souls, or do they have different souls? Like, what?
We're saying that they are ran by their animal nature rather than their kind of like.
So there's a dichotomy
between
woke
these days. That's what's hip with the kids.
Yeah, almost a dichotomy between animal nature and a spiritual nature, kind of. Or maybe not spiritual nature. You would say soul. And I just want to make sure I'm saying what you're saying correctly.
Yes, there are animal naturalistic desires that we have to have on Earth because our souls were placed into Homo erectus or Homo sapiens here on Earth. So we do have to grip with the fact that we are living in this reality and this perception.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. How do we know that our good intentions, our good justifications for good actions aren't natural?
Well, because like I said, if we're just looking for the goodness, the natural way for Hitler to protect his people was to eradicate every other.
Was it?
Human threat to him.
No animal on Earth that I know of has ever made that distinction, right? Like, it doesn't seem very natural to be in one sense.
There are people like, especially simians, who if another species tries to come into their home, they'll eradicate them. They won't coexist.
That's a good point.
Species. That's pretty natural.
That's a good point.
Natural.
But to have an organized system of a particular, race of human beings, for example, I don't know. To me, that might seem like a higher order thinking there. Maybe it's a higher order thinking to justify a base nature. But again, like to me, it's almost a false dichotomy. I don't know. It seems like. Go ahead, Oz.
Sven and Dan, are we not just saying we don't have an explanation for the reason we do or don't make good decisions or practice good or bad morality, so we're just going to plug in a soul or a God? Is that not in essence what we're doing there?
We're saying that our best understanding right now, just like our best understanding of temperature, is just the speeds of what atoms are moving, but on a quantum level, it could be so much more than that. What I'm saying right now is currently our understanding of right and wrong is the soul.
But we agree, like temperature and gravity, which have been talked about, we can still measure those things. Those are measurable. Where the soul, we can't measure. That's what I'm asking, really.
People do measure souls and the goodness of something. With the humanitarians, I believe Dan at least is a humanitarian, and so you are measuring the goodness of somebody, which to me is measuring their.
What are we saying there exactly, though? If we're saying the goodness of somebody is how much soul they have, does somebody have more soul versus less soul? What's the measurement there?
It's how in touch with their soul that they are.
Okay, in touch with their soul.
Over their animal.
But how do we measure that?
Like I said, how humanitarians, they get together and they discuss what is good for humans. We measure what it means to spread goodness. As humanitarians, you measure what it means to spread health and well-being.
Okay. Well, so just to like, give an example of, because I think Oz is hitting on this idea of measurement here, and I think that's interesting. If we were to look at somebody from 2,000 years ago, let's talk about like Aristotle or maybe Plato, Socrates, one of these philosophers,
Plato.
Right? Yeah, Plato, right? He was someone who was really interested in truth. He was someone who was interested in what's good and what's not. But you can look at the writings of Plato, and he would absolutely be okay with human slavery. I think unequivocally, I think he could make a justification for that, at least based on the observations I've seen. And other people from his time could do that. Does that mean that because I don't have that belief, that I think that it's wrong, that I'm more in touch with my soul than someone like Plato? Is it something where that can happen over time? What's the difference there?
Well, that would be where societal pressures, which is an animal, all nature, we see animals pressuring each other to have certain beliefs. And so I believe if it was in the zeitgeist to just approve of slavery, then a lot of people would have a hard time focusing on dismantling that, just like a lot of people in America, in the West, have a problem dismantling capitalism because it's just in our soul, or in our, in our norm.
Yeah.
But even, Plato was against moral relativism. There's no way to... Ideas can both be correct. Two moral beliefs can be correct.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm asking, right, is like... well, you mentioned a good point, right?
There's more moral than him. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we could be more moral, but I agree with you. I think that might be a possibility, but you also touched on something really interesting, which is like that society has forces on us, that influence how we think and how we do things. And, to me, that just says, well, that's an outside factor that's kind of influencing our behaviors. And whether or not we think it's right or not, at the end of the day, that's still something coming from like outside of us. You know what I mean? Like it's not necessarily our soul speaking to us. Like I didn't learn that slavery was wrong because I felt something like internal about it necessarily. I grew up in a world that didn't have slavery, at least around me, right? Slavery is obviously happening today, but I was told about the horrors that happened with people, and I was taught to have an empathy for people. And it seems like my morality has come from the constructs of my society. And I would argue probably Plato's did too, even though Plato did have some radical ideas. It's hard to make that distinction for me. It would be hard for me to say, yeah, this is something that comes from my soul, because I don't know of anything. I don't know if I could do that. Right.
It's really hard for me to say that you grew up learning that slavery was bad, and that's why you think it's bad. Because, like me, I grew up in South Alabama, and I strictly remember being 9 years old, never discussing really slavery. My family didn't approve of people of color, and I sat down and watched Gone with the Wind with my grandma, and I just bawled into tears, and I was asking, why is no one talking about these people being property of someone else? Like they're,
well, I guess
issue. So it wasn't societal factors that told me that slavery was wrong.
Yeah.
If it tells you that's wrong, then I guess that is a little enlightening, but
no, I guess I should clarify, because you're right. It does sound like I'm saying, oh, I had to learn that this thing was wrong. I didn't necessarily mean it like that. What I meant when I said that was I didn't experience slavery, right? I had no concept of it. It wasn't a thing that was in my life. And until I learned about it, I had an opinion on it, right? I had to know about the concept in order to make decisions about it. There's nothing internal that's giving me exactly an idea of how to do everything. I'm learning things as I'm experiencing them. I don't know if anything internal is giving me that. Something internal is given me in the sense that I'm a human being, and therefore I have emotions, and therefore I'm empathetic. That's true. But when we're talking about, human slavery is a specific construct that we can look at, and we can examine how people found the merits of that and whether or not we would think the merits of that are good or not, right? Obviously, you and I would agree it's not good. That's why we don't do it. But people a couple of 100 years ago would definitely find the merits of it. And they would do that through kind of their social organizations. It wasn't through their soul telling them necessarily. At least I don't think so, right? That wouldn't make any sense. because I don't know, there are people that were just as religious as anybody else and had similar, thoughts as anybody else, and yet they came to these conclusions. And I can't help but think that they came to those conclusions and even thought that they were right a lot of times, just because they lived in a world that said they were right.
Yeah, I don't see anything beyond a soul like making people fight against slavery, like that weren't oppressed by slavery. So as that would be my counter to your point, that, a couple hundred years ago, people approved of it. What motivated people to not approve of it? I don't think there's any economic or societal pressure to not want slavery. I think it's just a soul killing people. Maybe we should move on from this reality.
What do you did people's souls change from now before then? Was there an awakening from the inside? I mean, what's the process there?
Oh, yeah. So that kind of goes into my eclectic religious belief that we have been running on the show. I don't want to take too much time.
Yeah, we'll have to go in just a few minutes, but
Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where the gods belief came from. I do believe God came and gave us the souls, and so our souls are baby souls, and we don't necessarily know how to adjust to dealing with an animal body while also having to deal with an outside force that we can't see or isn't in our physical realm. So it took thousands and thousands and thousands of years to become more and more quote unquote woke. I don't like that term because it's super millennial, but
yeah, I get you. Yeah, I get you. And I appreciate you sharing.
I think it is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your perspectives, Fed. Thanks for answering our questions as we were asking them, and for being honest about your beliefs. I'd love to explore some of that other stuff you were talking about. You are right, though. We are getting a little long in the tooth with this particular call. But if you stick around, we are going to be on the Discord after show if you want to catch us there. And that goes to everybody else watching this live. But I want to go ahead and take just one more call here before we get out of here. So thanks, Sven, for calling in. Really appreciate it. And I hope to get to you again soon. And I'm not going to be the guy that's going to make the point after the caller has left, but just to evaluate my position on this, because I get asked this a lot about what I think about morality and stuff and where it comes from and stuff. It's got to be a combination of, again, the natural empathy, but also learning social constructs. Because I think that if I was born 4,000 years ago, I could be someone that justified slavery in some way. And because of the world that I lived in, I think we're also products of our environments. And that's what I was saying, this is a learned thing. Because to some people that's off-putting, because it's well, what do you mean you had to learn that slavery was wrong? But it's well, people had to learn that slavery was right. There's a learning process there as we're figuring this stuff out. It doesn't seem like we were completely born with the constructs that we had when it comes to morality. That's what I think.
No, even some of the stuff here in the States that we have going on in our society, a lot of the bigotry and the hate, those are taught behaviors. Those are things that people are sometimes force fed as kids, and they just grow up believing that should be and is their worldview, and it's sad. So to pretend that that's not the case, I think my claim would be that would be far-fetched in itself to claim that it's not learned. But to go back to the soul claim, I still lack any evidence to believe that there's anything called a soul within humanity. I don't have a good reason to believe that, and that's why when it does come up, I always go to the measuring stick. Do you have a ruler? Do you have a beaker? Do you have something that we can measure the soul in to demonstrate that this thing is true?
Yeah, it's hard to have a barometer on that. I agree with you. And that's not to say that I don't know. I think there's just a conflation. And again, I'm not going to be the guy that's going to continue to argue with the caller that's not there. But when we talk about, I don't know if we can say, the soul, it doesn't have to necessarily be there because we can evaluate things morally. I don't see if that's a requirement.
Correct. And that's what I mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. To me, that's just, I don't know. There could be other explanations besides a soul for that. And again, I still we might not know what a soul is. It sounds like it can be kind of a vaguely defined thing, and we don't have to know it on a quantum level, I guess, but it would help to know exactly what that would mean to have a soul in one's
Absolutely.
body versus not having one, right? So anyway, fascinating stuff, but let's get to one more call really quickly.